Hey, it's Richard Flentge, author of the book Verities, the Electric Mule. Today I'm going to tell you the story about the polar bears, which is a chapter that's featured in the book. And it goes back to a segment that I did on EVTV, Electric Vehicle Television, with Jack Rickard. He had assigned me a subject matter related to environmentalists. And I would say I did it just as a part of my job. I don't know that I started out as an environmentalist. I sort of ended up that way. And in my blogs and some of my writings, I would dub myself an accidental environmentalist, because as I researched and I watched how people spoke about the subject of polar bears, I began to get suspicious and understand that the narrative was being controlled on the facts and the truth of the matter. Now, the story originated off of press releases and videos and big stories written by BBC, and that was that there was a considerable strain on the polar bear population, which is featured really in the Arctic and north of Alaska and northern Canada. And the crux of the matter was the polar ice was thinning out, and this was creating swimming distances and hardship on the polar bears, and they were drowning. They were beginning to die off. And during a particular year, 2011, they found multiple dead polar bears. Well, behind the scenes, there was the suspicion that particulate matter from coal-fired power plants and basically other exhaust emissions had risen into the atmosphere, created a aerosol, a particulate, and then traveled to the polar regions, cooled down, and dropped down on the ice. Now, this was substantiated by they tested the material and began to find sulfur in the ice pack, as well as small microscopic black, basically coal ash. Now, the world of denialism tends to say that you can't correlate the two. However, the facts were the ice thinned out and the polar bears died. Now, at the same time, the U.S. administration took a hard pivot on coal plant emissions, as well as pressured China. And what I'd written in the book, and again what I conclude from my journalistic instincts, was that they detected material from China's coal plants landing on these polar ice caps. The ice caps began to absorb more sunlight and melt quicker. And if you couple that with an unusual weather year, you create a polar ice cap melt-off. And that's one thing that when you talk about the worldview, they see things that we don't always see, which is this detailed satellite imagery of the ice caps changing shapes. Now, I had worked for Jack Rickard, and Jack Rickard had a lot of journalistic instincts. And he knew when situations had arisen and the facts were not always present, you could often find out the truth, or you could draw conclusions as a journalist based on what the response was. Now, in the particular reaction to the polar bear drownings and the ice caps melting, there was a tremendous improvement in the coal plants in China, as well as the U.S. upped its regulation to reduce the amount of particulate matters that come out of coal plants. And they increased the height of the stacks. And in working with Jack Rickard often could connect the dots that other people couldn't always see. And he would tell a story about when he research computer companies, and they were all making claims about download speeds on their routers. Well, he got a testing device and found out their claims and their actual performances were two different things. And he jumped the journalistic fence to figure out what these companies were really doing, which they figured out no matter what their equipment really did, it made people buy the router if you said it had a lot of download speed. Now, I sort of extrapolate that into the explanation of the polar bears. You know, it was very difficult and a lot of deniers, and you can wedge in these articles that there's no proof to the correlation of coal plant particulate exhaust and debris that affect polar ice caps. But the world governments and the US government and the Chinese government changed their policy and increased the smokestack height, as well as took efforts to reduce particulate matter in their smokestacks at that exact time point. Now, they knew something we didn't know. And that's one thing you've got to grasp in the big picture of all this. A tremendous amount of what is affecting us is what's coming out of tailpipes. And those tailpipes emit particulate gases as well as heat. And that stuff goes somewhere. So in the end, I always say this: climate change and the effects that are going on our planet are not all just about science. It's about math and how this stuff adds up. Anyhow, that's a great story right from the book, and enjoyed this time being with you today. Hit that like and subscribe button, and if you want to come back for more, there's plenty more stories here from Verities and Electric Mule. Thank you.